Number 7. Ford Maverick, 1970 to 1977. Ford developed the Maverick quickly and cheaply, and kept showing up for every owner who discovered what affordable actually meant once the purchase was complete. The Maverick arrived in 1970, positioned as Ford's answer to the import challenge, a compact that could win back buyers who were drifting toward Japanese and European alternatives. The engineering was borrowed and the development was accelerated, none of that visible on the showroom floor. It became visible later, in rust that appeared faster than owners expected in northern climates, in build quality that varied between units in ways that should not have varied on a new car, and in a rear suspension that produced handling characteristics more suited to a decade earlier than the car it was being asked to compete against. The Maverick entered the market at exactly the moment Japanese manufacturers were redefining what buyers expected from compact cars. As the decade progressed, buyers increasingly realized competing imports were offering a higher standard of refinement, quality, and consistency than Ford's compact sedan was delivering. The ownership record confirmed that gap in ways that became difficult to ignore. Number 6. Ford Aspire, 1994 to 1997. The Aspire sits at number 6 not because it produced a famous scandal or safety story. It produced neither. It sits here because it represents something Ford should never have put its name on. The Aspire was built by Kia in Korea and sold through Ford dealerships at the bottom of the market. The 1.3-liter four-cylinder produced 63 horsepower. 0 to 60 required patience that highway driving did not always allow. NHTSA crash test performance raised questions that a car sold primarily on the basis of affordability had a particular obligation to answer clearly, and did not. Interior quality communicated a price point rather than a car worth trusting. Ford's name appeared on a vehicle whose performance and safety characteristics were inconsistent with what that name had historically implied. The Aspire is on this list not because it failed buyers through catastrophic mechanical failure, but because Ford asked buyers to trust a badge on a product that struggled to justify it. Number 5. Ford Mustang II, 1974 to 1978. The Mustang II is remembered as a compromise, a car that shrank the Mustang to meet a new regulatory and economic reality. That framing is too generous. The Mustang II was not a compromise, it was a replacement of everything the Mustang name stood for, with a vehicle built on a platform it shared with the Pinto. The fuel crisis of 1973 justified downsizing. It did not justify building a performance icon successor on the architecture of one of the most criticized compacts in American history, powering it with a four-cylinder that produced outputs the original Mustang's buyers would have found embarrassing, and selling it at a price that implied continuity with a heritage the car had no mechanical relationship to. The Mustang name carried buyers to the showroom. The Mustang II gave them something that reflected a very different set of priorities. Ford spent the following decade rebuilding the credibility that 4 years of the Mustang II had systematically spent down. That recovery cost more than the savings ever justified. Number 4. Ford Tempo, 1984 to 1994. 10 years, that is how long Ford sold the Tempo to American buyers who needed a reliable compact. And for much of that decade, what they received fell measurably short of what the competition at the same price was delivering. The Tempo arrived in 1984 with aerodynamic styling that positioned it as modern and forward-looking. The ATX automatic transaxle accumulated complaints across the production run. Rust appeared in the lower body in harsher climates. Build quality varied between cars in ways that made individual ownership experiences inconsistent in the wrong direction. Ford improved the Tempo across its 10-year run, and the later versions were meaningfully better than the first. But the buyers who came in early paid for that development arc, and across a decade of large volume sales, the Tempo's consistency problems were not isolated incidents. They were patterns experienced by enough buyers to establish that Ford had shipped a product before the product was ready for what it was being asked to do. Number 3. Ford Escape 2001 to 2005. The Ford Escape arrived as Ford's entry into one of the fastest-growing segments in the American market, the compact SUV, positioned directly against the Honda CR-V and Toyota RAV4. What Ford delivered was a car whose reliability record fell significantly short of that competition across multiple documented systems. Transmission failures in V6 models occurred at mileages buyers considered well within normal service life. Power steering failures created handling situations owners described as concerning. Throttle body faults caused stalling and erratic engine behavior. NHTSA opened investigations covering steering and fire risk. Consumer Reports rated the Escape below average for reliability year after year during this period. The gap between what Ford was offering and what Honda and Toyota were delivering in the same segment became impossible to ignore and impossible to justify to buyers who had paid comparable prices expecting comparable quality. Ford significantly improved later Escape generations. The buyers who purchased the first generation helped pay for lessons that should have been resolved before the car went on sale. Number 2. Ford Explorer 1991 to 2001. The Ford Explorer defined the mainstream SUV market in the 1990s. For most of the decade, it was the best-selling vehicle in its category, a product that millions of American families chose as their primary family car. That scale is what made what followed so consequential. The safety issue that emerged publicly around 2000 and 2001 centered on Firestone tires fitted to the Explorer experiencing tread separation, which in combination with the Explorer's handling characteristics contributed to rollovers resulting in deaths and serious injuries. NHTSA investigations documented hundreds of fatalities linked to the issue. Congressional hearings followed. Ford and Firestone attributed responsibility to each other, a dispute that produced extensive documentation of what each company knew and when. What the record showed was that warning signs had been accumulating in the data for years before the public reckoning arrived. Few vehicles in American history had been trusted by more families. The scale of that trust was matched by the scale of what followed when it was broken.
Number 1. Ford Pinto, 1971 to 1980. Every car on this list failed Ford buyers in some specific way. The Ford Pinto belongs at number 1, not because it was the most unreliable Ford ever built, or the worst to drive, or the most commercially unsuccessful. It belongs here because the documented record of what happened and what was decided has no equivalent in American automotive history. The Pinto was developed in under 25 months. The fuel tank was placed between the rear bumper and the rear axle with limited structural protection in rear-end collisions. Testing confirmed that in specific impact scenarios, the tank could be punctured and fuel could ignite. An internal analysis at Ford, made public through litigation and known as the Grimshaw Memo, compared the cost of a design modification against projected settlement costs. The modification was not made. Ford recalled approximately 1.5 million Pintos in 1978. The company was charged with reckless homicide in Indiana. The Pinto is number 1 because the distance between what Ford's engineers documented, what Ford's executives calculated, and what Ford's buyers were asked to accept is the most serious case of its kind that any American manufacturer has produced.